So I've now had some time with Crackdown 3, and honestly, I'm a little surprised. There are some things I really like in the game, and others that make me really mad, and overall, right now, I'm thinking it's a pretty mixed experience that, depending on who you are and kind of your experience with the Crackdown franchise, you may or may not like. I'm going to talk about the campaign and the multiplayer both, and just give my first impressions of both of them. I'm also planning on doing a more extensive, in-depth video on Crackdown 3 after I put a little bit more time into the game and seen absolutely everything it has to offer. So first, let's start with the focus of the game being the campaign. First, performance-wise, I'd say it runs pretty well. It never felt too choppy, load times weren't too bad, and graphically it even looks better than I initially thought. Just from the gameplay I'd seen, I thought it looked terrible, and while the graphics still aren't great, it doesn't look just horrible, and I'm pretty okay with it. Now, the gameplay actually did really surprise me, and so far I'm actually really liking it. It still feels like Crackdown, but sort of updated. I still also sort of have those original complaints that I saw when I saw the gameplay, that it looks too similar to just the original Crackdown, but it's definitely way more fun than I thought it would be, and something about it is just, it's simple, but it's still fun. The lock-on gameplay is, like I said, simple, but it's just sort of addicting, going around shooting everyone you can, shooting tons of enemies, especially as you lock onto their heads and torso and just all their different body parts. And I also think there's enough variety in the combat engagements, sort of in the way, kind of dependent on the player, not the engagements themselves, but just kind of from the shooting you can do, melee attacks, grenades, and just throwing anything you can find, which, by the way, is just a ton of fun. In fact, the first time I picked up just a random pipe or piece of debris, and I threw it at an enemy, and he just went flying across the map, I instantly felt like I was playing the original Crackdown again, so that was a really cool moment. And just all the different movement options, especially as you start upgrading the different things like your agility, and having the thing like the thruster, and being able to scale buildings, is also just surprisingly fun. Even things like the driving, which aren't as much of a focus, aren't really brought down too much by the sort of sloppy controls. So yeah, I'm actually shocked by how much I've really been enjoying the shooting stuff in this campaign, and overall just upgrading my different abilities, it's just been a lot of fun, and I'm really surprised, I'm pleased, and I'm really happy. But that's about where my praise stops. While I think the core gameplay is done pretty well, it's just in a game that doesn't take advantage of it. I'm still not bored yet of just driving around the city and stuff and getting agility orbs and things like that, since that's just really addicting and fun. But besides that, and some races, which are fine, you're really only left with the same 4 or 5 combat engagements over and over again. You've got your typical open world prisoner camps, propaganda towers, chemical plants, standard outposts, and just other things like that that are scattered around the city. The only real variety you get is with some sort of like enhanced enemies that are at some, and sort of like the towers you kind of have to climb up, and that's sort of different, but besides that, they're pretty much all the same thing. And yeah, I've had so much fun doing them so far just because of the gameplay, but they're pretty much just all the same experience, and I'm already starting to get a little bit bored of them. Again, the gameplay I think is really good, but the situations in which it's used in the open world just aren't interesting at all. They're so cookie cutter and generic that I can see myself getting extremely bored of the entire campaign really quickly. So I would say, just to include more variety of things to do around the city in order to improve this campaign, have more diverse enemy engagements that are memorable, or do something at least a little bit different. I also could not stop thinking about the original footage we saw from Gamescom 2015 of all that destructibility, and how much more fun this campaign would be if the destructibility was still present. That would completely change how you approach pretty much every encounter in the open world. It would change which weapons you use, the gameplay, and it would just make everything so much better. So yeah, that's about it for the campaign. It's incredibly simple, and it doesn't really do too much different, and it definitely doesn't feel like a 2019 game. The gameplay, however, is incredibly fun, and the shooting is the strongest element of it for me. However, the actual encounters you have in the campaign are mostly stale and pretty pathetic for how long this game has been in development. So overall, it's the epitome pretty much of wasted potential. Now, the multiplayer I really don't have too much to say about because I simply think it's okay. There's really only 3 maps right now, so there's not too much variety and only 2 game modes, and the shooting that I enjoy so much in the campaign just really doesn't work with the PvP multiplayer, I don't think. It's okay, it doesn't feel terrible, but the movement even feels weirdly limited since you only have 2 different equipment to choose from. The destructibility I think is actually really cool though, and the level of it is really impressive for a multiplayer game, and that's really the one highlight though. And yeah, I don't hate it or anything, it just feels like nothing. It feels like a tacked on multiplayer edition, really only there to use the cloud-based destructibility that they promised us 4 years ago. Aside from that one technical achievement though, it feels incredibly dated, and for me just wasn't too much fun. Oh yeah, and the fact that you can't play with your friends at launch in this game in a multiplayer mode when the game has been in development for at least 5 years, it's not a good sign. That's a terrible thing for a game in the year 2019 to be lacking. So for the remaining time I will be playing Crackdown 3, I probably won't really be touching this multiplayer too much, and it will most likely be forgotten very soon. And so yeah, that's about it for my impressions of Crackdown 3. Honestly, I'm happy that I enjoyed the campaign as much as I do. The shooting, once again, really does it for me, and it still feels like Crackdown, and it's just fun. It's simple, it's dumb, it feels like Crackdown, and I'm surprised that I enjoy it as much as I do. And if the shooting like that was present in a more interesting and varied world, with the original destructibility that we were promised, I think I'd absolutely love this game. However, as it stands with the kind of bare bones basic world and the no destructibility in the campaign, it's just okay, and that really sucks since this game should have been so much more. If you guys have played Crackdown 3, let me know what you think about it, and once again, I will probably have another video out sometime later in a couple weeks maybe, after I've played it a little bit more and I just want to give more extensive thoughts kind of in a full-fledged review. Anyways, thank you guys for watching Majestic Gaming, and let me know what you think about Crackdown 3 if you have played it.